a working prototype that I have working. I can show it to you right now. All the lights work. The only thing we have to configure is sensitivity of them, because I found out that these move.
Oh, yes, because it's under this, right?
Yeah.
Right.
How good the sensors work. The ones that are on are still on. So the other ones are too sensitive, so let's move them away. See what fun I had underneath these that we caught. This one's too far away now, but you can see they do catch and fade. And so once we started them in, the actual, they shouldn't move, and that should fix the problem. Let's see if we can do that. Yeah.
Yes. Motion sensor?
Yes. Yeah. Let's fix the last one then. Almost.
And do you capture acceleration?
I capture all the data points and we pass it to the iPad. Basically what this does is it collects 5 samples and then averages them out, and it says am I on or off. There's an array with a threshold, and you figure that up and down. If it catches, then it turns it on. If it doesn't, it lets it fade out. And so what I've done now with this is I've just done this code to capture each thumb and say if they're on or off, and put that in a character. Instead of 8 per character, then that's what I'm going to send off. And I've put the code in already on this, and it's named nothing right now. And when you fix the character, that's what's going to happen. So once you've done collected all the data, I'm going to parse it, get the characters, and push them all out. The only thing I have to complain about is a movement. The only thing. That makes for a very challenging environment. That's true, but it's a prototype of code. I don't want to waste the LEDs. We might actually use them soon. And these are the ones from the Octolights kit. So, yeah, the only thing that isn't are these white LEDs, and these are bought from HSC. They're the super bright ones. So we can choose whatever LED color we want. And hopefully once Scott, bring the board yet to you? Okay, once that's up, Matt and Matt's done with the serial code for my end of it, and just get Tristan going and building the array. Because once that's sent off, all the iPad does is just get the inputs and keeps the list and parses it out and says, do I want to do this for that?
You guys need to come up with a set of outcomes, right? So that what you pass to the iPad.
Now what we're doing is passing the full all the data. Yeah, they're going to process all the data and choose what from this data what would happen. So it simplifies out what we have to send rather than having to interpret all that. Hey, Matt. Good. They're brushes it, and it works. The only complaint is that these move.
Because
They're not flat. Yeah.
Oh, well, we have our other.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yeah.
So I've also...
That's what we have to
connect all together.
work on.
So the other thing is that you the code. Oh, good. And I've also looked it up and tossed that back 0.right, and you got the characters. So what I'm building now is the array that just runs through.
Yeah, I talked to Matt about the same
Okay.
thing. So he knows really.
So what I'm thinking is passing the character by character. The first 8 is per character. And with the code right now, it says what is intended I'm building that. But once it's done, that's what's happening. And the last character.
I thought you did for some reason. Maybe it was your other one that did.
No, it has a this has a VGA. This old baby has a VGA.
You don't have a serial to USB adapter somewhere, do you?
I have my
He's not around.
what kind of charger do you use?
No, that's not what we're. Yeah, the other. So you can into his. Where would you?
Server. Forget about it.
Sorry,
Server.
I wonder if Tim Griffin's around because he might know.
Yeah, you're not like
We should try and figure that out.
they can let you in. You can just
Okay.
you'll be happy. You'll be fine. So there's one organization that you can
When is he released? Because Ladine told us about his thing and his movie. Yeah.
Oh, it's always fun. Things going that way.
Is Joel in here? You know, she was trying to go through that. You know Jolie. She was
A couple times, and I also met.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Her uncle?
Uncle, there we go. Yeah. In CS11.
I never want to think about that guy ever again.
Yeah, the only reason why he knows is because he stood out very effectively.
He stood out in every class he's ever been. Yeah, let me play a game with sound while someone's lecturing. That's a good idea.
Well, the funny thing that's happened is that he always comes, when they have those seen him come, he has a Bluetooth headset, you know, whatever. And he's like, oh, let me get my headset ready or whatever he's trying to get, yeah.
I just talked about but you don't do so you pretty much know the same thing I do.
Oh, that, wait, no, that should make sense.
Oh, she's coming. Maybe I might want to scoot over my head. This is you heading to Salazar Hall. So you didn't go in 26 and look at the device, did you?
Like literally, like it took me a minute to realize that this is
We need to build some kind of harness and Scott that was one. He's totally on the ball. As far as whatever you're doing, just tell me and I'll build it.
well, we're just aiming vertically or horizontally out.
Well, right now what we're going to have to do is take our proto board and basically like plug it in. Because he's got these little like wires coming out that bend down, and that's it. I mean, it's all ordered, it's all color coded. That's nice. So we know like this is going for this. He went through and tested. It's really cool, actually.
They just pulled it out, and I was bleeding everywhere.
You and I are going to have fun this weekend.
Okay.
As you perhaps don't know, Dr. Ladine is out of town today. So it is with honor that I introduce Jason Shankel to you today, today's speaker. Jason has been here before, always graciously accepts our invitation, and every time brings a different aspect to his work to us. And the depth and breadth of his work is quite impressive. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. So my name is Jason Shankel. I am currently working at Stupid Fun Club with Will Wright. Will Wright, the developer of Sims and SimCity and Spore. It's a startup intellectual think tank in Emeryville. And prior to that, I was with Will at Electronic Arts Maxis, where I worked on Spore and The Sims and various versions of SimCity. And you can catch me there on my internet site. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just search for my name and you'll find me there. And I'm here today to talk about prototyping, the prototyping process in particularly in software development in general, but in game development in particular. the basic idea is that, you know, when we're developing a complex piece of software, even if it's something where the requirements are pretty objective and pretty easy to figure out, it's very difficult to just draft up a document that will describe what the software does and then go build it. You know, we've known for decades that what used to be called the waterfall model just is not viable. And of course, in the modern world, with software being so much more complex than it was even when the waterfall model was developed, it's simply impossible to state ahead of time exactly what you're going to go and what you're going to do and then go do it. But the good news is that we have tools that are much more capable and advanced of allowing us to work with the machine to develop intermediate stages of the project. Furthermore, when you're developing a video game is not an Office suite or a web browser or something, or a development environment or something like that. It's a subjective piece of entertainment. It has to be fun and interesting and hit the target audience you're going for, and be rendered with a certain amount of aesthetic quality, and performance is a huge issue. You know, you have to do things at 30 frames a second. And so it becomes very vital to prove to yourself that you are going to hit not only your technical requirements, but also that you're hitting your creative requirements as well. And so what this talk is structured around the prototyping process in Spore. How many people here have heard of Spore? Played Spore? Okay, good. So speaking to familiar ground. I was involved in Spore from the beginning of the process. I was the first software engineer on Spore, along with another artist and another couple of engineers who came on a little bit later. And my key contribution to it was the development of our prototype sections. How many people have seen the prototypes that are available online for Spore? Okay, a few. So you may or may not know, if you've visited the Spore site, that Electronic Arts released a series of prototypes that we developed for the game to give you an idea of how the ideas for the game kind of gelled and how we explored different notions of what it was going to be like. And this talk is going to cover those prototypes, the ones that we released. So just a quick overview. Here are some screenshots from Spore for those who are not familiar with Spore. It's a game that's essentially about astrobiology, about the development of life on multiple different planets in the galaxy. And in the game, you play life forms at various stages of development, from being a protozoa to being an animal, to being a member of a tribe, to having a planetary civilization, to having a spacefaring civilization. And throughout the stage, you develop your biology and then later on your technology using a series of editors that we use to give you a way of directing the evolution of your species. Okay, and even though it's a fairly light piece of entertainment in terms of galactic life, we did a lot of basic research in the development of astrobiology. I forgot I should disclaim here, this talk is completely my own opinion, my own perspective, and my own experience on working on these prototypes. It doesn't reflect necessarily the views of Electronic Arts or Maxis or Will Wright or anybody else. This is just all coming from my own thing. So if they disagree with me, listen to them and not me. So, in the process, can we have the overheads off, the lights? Some of these slides are a little thin. Okay. So, when we started off talking about Spore, the first thing we wanted to talk about was the evolution of cosmic structures, cosmic development, how galaxies form, how solar systems form, how planetary nebula form. And keep in mind, this is back in 2000. This is back when we first started getting these fantastic pictures, if you can remember, out of the Hubble spacecraft. They've been out for about 4 or 5 years. And we started to commonly see the structures of our galaxy for the first time as being these rich, three-dimensional, gaseous, gravitationally bound, like lumps of clay. And one of the ideas that Will had was that he really wanted us to be able to sculpt galactic structures. Now, this is something that didn't ultimately end up in the game, but the first prototype I developed for this is a system called Particle Man. And Particle Man is a large-scale n-squared particle-to-particle gravitational attraction system that runs a gravitational simulation and creates gravitational collapse. And the idea, behind prototyping, the first rule I want to get across as you're thinking about prototyping is always be very clear about the question you're trying to answer. Prototypes are fundamentally about answering a particular question about a product. And we had all these broad talks about astrobiology and astrophysics and galactic evolution and all these things. But what the question that Particle Man wanted to answer was, can we reliably simulate, let me get over to the video, I'll show it. Can we reliably simulate the kinds of dynamics that gave rise to the birth of the galaxy, and that also gave rise to the birth of our own solar system and things like that. And I have a little video here of Particle Man. This is you can download off of Electronic Arts' site. And as you can see here, it'll play. Yeah, there we go. So here we have the particles, and they're in this soup, right? And they're all gravitationally attracting to each other, and it's a huge mathematical problem, right? The development of we wanted to develop pictures that look like the Hubble spacecraft was developing. We wanted them to evolve naturally like we do in a sim game. We didn't want to necessarily have to author them, although we ultimately ended up doing that for the game, but that's just, as we edited our requirements. So the question is, could we give rise to those structures? Could we solve the problem? So I began researching, particle simulation, and found that, of course, the huge problem with particle simulation is that it's an n-squared problem, right? I have like 1,000 particles here, and they're all being attracted to each other. So ultimately what I did was it's a little bit hard to see in the video, but I put all of these particles into an octree, right? So that a particle, if it's very near to a neighbor, directly gravitationally attracts to it. But if it's far away, and I'm like, I want to figure out my gravitational attraction to see all of you or particles over there, I have an aggregated particle that just represents your whole presence, and my vector goes toward that. And it reduces the problem from an n-squared problem to an n log n problem. Okay, and that was the fundamental question. Could we reduce the algorithmic complexity of simulating large-scale gravitational collapse to something that we could run in real time on a desktop? Okay, and the other question we wanted to ask is, could we use these particles to actually give rise to the kinds of shapes that we see in the Hubble scope? So you can see over here what I did was we added inside of this prototype, we added the capacity for the particles all to emit a field. Okay? So every particle in the system emits a field into this regular grid. And the points on the regular grid end up with a field value. And what you do is you go in and you create what's called an isosurface. An isosurface is a surface that defines a boundary line where the field values are all the same. Right? And so through sort of this complex set of geometry, all these particles are emitting a field. The ones that are areas where the particles are more dense create this deep cloud, and as you can see, we kind of get this nebula-looking structure. So even though nebulas aren't, they're not isosurface, field boundary systems, we discovered through this prototype that isosurface field around a series of gravitationally collapsing particles adequately looks like a nebula structure, right? And so setting out to answer the question, can we simulate the galaxy? Can we have it evolve on a desktop, if not in real time, then at least in some sort of practical time, where people could say evolve the galaxy a little bit, it would change? Yes. Could we develop artist tools in case we wanted to author our galaxy so that our artists would be able to lay out nebulas very easily? Yes, we could. And can we simulate gravitational attraction and collapse in such a way that would give rise to the kinds of shapes that we expect to see in a galaxy? Yes, we could. Yes, we can. Okay, and these were all early risks that we identified in SPORE that we went on to solve with this prototype. All right, moving on. So the next thing we kind of wanted to get to is it's a little bit easy to kind of forget about today because graphics are so they're so ubiquitous and they're so fantastic looking. And I don't have an animation of this one, unfortunately. But back then, and keep in mind this is the year 2000, 2002, 3, around then, customized shaders were a brand new thing, right? We were still trying to figure out OpenGL and DirectX how you can get cool-looking effects out of the standard pipeline, and if you have to break out the standard pipeline, what kind of programmable shaders can you expect to have? Nowadays, every chip has a set of shaders that's just incredible. There's whole shader building packages, and we wouldn't have to answer this question. But back then, the question was, how good can we make nature look, and how well can we simulate the local dynamics of a planet? Because we knew that we wanted to do biology as our basis for our game. It wasn't just going to be planets knocking around, right? And so I set out and developed the second prototype, which was set out to answer two questions. One question was, can we simulate a natural environment in such a way with water and life and trees and things like that, that it would be as fun to play with as something like SimCity, as mechanical and utilitarian as that is, or like the Sims where you have your house. Can I really give you a set of tools for like painting terrain and having water flow around on it and slosh that would work on a PC? Nowadays, this is not a big risk. Again, we are several, we're a good decade later when the machines are much more powerful. But back then it wasn't so clear. And secondly, how good can we make it look? And this doesn't look super fantastic by today's standards, or even it wasn't even really state of the art back then. But it involves all of the elements of what would have been a high-end graphics pipeline for water. This prototype is called Water Boy, and basically what it does is it has two layers working here. We have a terrain layer, and we have a water layer, right? Now, when you go to simulate water, the governing equation, the governing system for simulating water is called the Navier-Stokes equation. And the Navier-Stokes equation is a complex partial differential equation for solving non-turbulent flow through a system that's bound by pressure and all that kind of stuff. And I did a lot of work with Navier-Stokes solvers. And the long story short is that we're not publishing a scientific paper. We need something a whole lot more linear than Navier-Stokes and a whole lot more bounded. This is just to run in real time on a PC. And so instead of this is not a water flow model. This is a water wave model. And so we have a terrain layer that's defined as a height field, which is just a two-dimensional array of height values, and then you draw triangles between the points at each point on the grid. And then there's a secondary grid, which is also just a height field, which is the water layer. Okay, and the way the water layer works, as you can see here, this is it distorted up, about to splash down, is like a spring field. All right. So unlike the terrain, which is fixed, the water layer has neighbors. Every point in the grid has neighbors that are above or below it or at the same level. And depending on the vertical displacement of your neighbor, that creates a spring function. Does everybody remember from spring distortion from physics, right? F equals kx, right? The more that you distort, the force that you feel between two masses on a spring is proportional to the distance which the spring is extended, right? And so that's all we did. It's just a linear spring field. It's just like every point calculates the net force on it, up or down, based on the net number, 4 springs basically to its 4 cardinal neighbors. And then at every point has a velocity, right, which is preserved from the previous frame. And the force adds to the velocity. And as you go up, the force begins to drag you down. As you go down, the force begins to drag you up. There's no need for gravity because the overall balance of forces stays the same, and all you have to do is renormalize the whole volume of the water to correct for floating point errors on every frame. And then what you do is you add in a little friction, right? So you just say, okay, well you've got a velocity, and I'm going to damp it, by point. I'm going to multiply it by 0.9 on every frame, so that if you're moving, you're naturally going to slow down and stop. Okay, and what that creates is a big field of water that behaves like a placid lake, like something that's you can drop a comet into, and it'll whoosh, give you this nice wave effect. It's not so great for waterfalls or rivers. It doesn't create splashing. It's very viscous. It behaves much more like a gel, than real water. But the purpose behind Waterboy was, as I said, to answer these two questions. One was, can we create a natural environment simulation that will be fun to play with, even if it's not completely realistic? And can we make it look good? And the making it look good part, back then, as I said, multi-texturing was just a brand new idea. And so it's a little bit difficult to see, but we have water caustics. We have an environment map reflecting the sky. The sky is a sky box, right, that has 6 photographs, or not photographs, but renderings of terrain around it that reflect onto the water using a custom shader that does that. We have the water caustics have a point where they're detecting the edge between the, like when the water comes up, it wants to soften out so it doesn't cut off sharp and it doesn't go up above the water line. And that was a custom shader that gets added in. If you didn't have custom shader support, this prototype, you'd see the caustics would be a lot harsher. And so the second question, it wasn't really a question to ask, it was more of a training, exercise was, can I learn this brand new technology so that we can start showing off the kind of graphics that we can get. And the reason that was so important for us is because working with our artist, Ocean Quigley, he's a very sort of programmatically oriented guy, right? He thinks about art in terms of code in a lot of ways, or in terms of geometric processes and steps. And so we had a great relationship in that he would think of, like, he'd show me something you can do in 3D Studio Max. He's like, well, you can do this, this, and this with these operators. And he gave me these operators. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that in OpenGL. Let me see if we can get a real-time version. Okay, moving on from Waterboy. So so the first prototype, Particle Man, is about simulation. Could we simulate? Could we make the shapes we want to make? This was about simulation as well, but also presentation. Can we make it look a lot nicer? Because Particle Man didn't have very impressive graphics. The next thing we wanted to look into was the dynamics of cellular automata. Okay, and how many people played SimCity or seen or okay, and how many people have heard of Conway's Life? Okay, so Conway's Life and cellular automata briefly. Will is the guy who he developed SimCity from a system called Conway's Life. And Conway's Life is an old school cellular automata system that had rules. It was basically a big grid of values, and you can be alive or dead in Conway's system. And a cell would come to life if it was surrounded by an adequate number of living neighbors. If it was surrounded by too many living neighbors, it would die. I think it was like 3 or 4. And if it had too few living neighbors, I think it was 1 or fewer, it would die. But if you had 2, I think it was if you had 2 or 3 living neighbors, you'd come to life. And on every pass, you just go through and calculate the new life or death value for the cell, right? And you can get these incredibly complex and emergent behaviors out of Conway's Life. You get these animations, you'll see them online if you search, where there are whole shapes that are gliders and repeaters and copiers and destroyers and and lumps that'll state that are stable and things that'll fly apart, and all of this incredible, like, basically there's a whole natural history here. There's a whole like field of life forms that are in the shape of this little algorithmic thing, and that was the basis for SimCity. SimCity is a cellular automata system. Okay, so the industrial and residential neighborhoods rise and grow depending on values from a map that is derived by looking at its neighbors and normalizing things out or concentrating things, And the differences in SimCity, we have what are called trips on traffic, where there are little trips that are calculated along the traffic grid, which basically plant values in the cellular automata and allow you to create something you can't do in Conway, which is non-local effects. So it's impossible in life to have like something swimming over here and then you do something up here that affects this unless it comes into causal contact with it. And causal contact is one cell away. So Will took the Conway's Life and added networks to it so that you could basically create wormholes, essentially, inside of this system. So we hadn't really developed a theory of cellular automata. We knew we wanted this to be a basis for how our environment would grow and for how civilizations would grow. It's very fundamental to the way that we've looked at the world at Maxis for years. But we never developed a general system. We always just kind of worked to developing these ad hoc cellular automata in different contexts. So I wanted to develop a prototype here. The question was, can we develop a system that will allow us to simulate a wide range of phenomena that we think are simulatable with cellular automata and cheaply and efficiently. Right. And the system I developed is called Biome. And basically what Biome did was it took the basic Conway idea that you have a grid and you define a number of species. And the species is any value the cell that a cell can have. So this is a forest fire simulator. Okay, and in a forest fire simulator, I basically have a couple of values. I have ash, which is dead. I have 2 stages of life, young and old, and then I have a couple of stages of fire. Well, I think there are 3 stages of fire. And the rule in this system is that ash turns to young at some very low random rate, like 1 in 1,000 on every frame. It's unlike Conway; it's a non-deterministic cellular automata. So a rule fires with a probability. Basically, if you meet the requirements, you then roll a die and see if this rule will fire. And that gives us more breakup. That's how SimCity works. Okay, young becomes old at a random rate. All right, it doesn't wait for. There's no clocks ticking really. It just says you could be young and you could be old in the next frame. But I say you have a 1 in 10,000 chance, basically, if you're young of becoming old. So on average, it's going to take you about 5,000 cycles. So what you'll see is in the aggregate, it'll look like young areas take a while to turn old, even if a few younglings turn old very quickly and others stay young for too long. You'll never notice that because it's a big statistical cloud, right? And then old randomly becomes fire at a very, very low probability. Again, that's supposed to be a lightning strike. And then old in the presence of fire catches fire at a high probability. Young in the presence of fire catches fire at a low probability. And then fire reduces to ash at a moderate probability. And of course, that the ash respawns and becomes young again. So I can show you what that looks like here. Clean up as I go. Okay, so here's Biomes forest fire simulator. Now the idea, that this idea of simulating a forest fire this way is nothing that is, it was not revolutionary for us at Maxis, but this is the kind of thing we've been doing for like a long, long time, right? And you can see this development here of this, it playing out. But what I did develop was a language for capturing this idea. I didn't write a forest fire simulator. Biomes is not a forest fire simulator. There are a bunch of other things that we've done, all kinds of different colored light shows with this. The specification for how this works is borrowed from chemical stoichiometry. Okay, let's see, I forget if I have a slide on the chemical equation. Let me see if I do. No, I don't. Okay, so I'll have to just describe it while it's playing. Okay, so we knew we wanted to develop cellular automata rather like this. This is a natural process, so this was an ideal candidate to capture. So instead of writing just a forest fire simulator, what I did was I set up this grid, and I said that each cell is like a chemical state in a chain, in a stoichiometric chain. If you're taking chemistry, you have a reaction chain. You have reactants and products, and the products become the reactants for the next step, right? Like in a cell. And what I did was I described each cell's behavior according to stoichiometry. So I said basically things like ash in the presence of nothing, no catalyst, gives rise to young at this particular rate. Okay, and young in the presence of no catalyst gives rise to old at this particular rate. And then I said that old in the presence of no catalyst gives rise to fire at this particular rate. But then I said old in the presence of fire gives rise to fire. Right? So fire is the catalyst that turns old into fire. Young in the presence of fire gives rise to fire at this reduced rate, or from old. And this chemically stoichiometric language that I created said, here's your reactant, here's your product, here's your rate. Here's your reactant, here are your catalyst requirements, here's your product, here's your rate, is how the rules were specified. And this allowed us to create a broad range of the kinds of cellular automata that we had created in SimCity. Right? And so now we knew that we had a language for developing the cellular automata that we needed for Spore. So again, we're asking ourselves one question: how are we going to express simulation of certain kinds of things? We figured out the simulation of large-scale galaxies, and we figured out the simulation of playing around with a sloshy water, highly physical environment. And we also knew that we wanted this statistical model that to exist on a planetary scale and on a galactic scale. And now we had a language for it, which this prototype gave us. Okay. So the next thing we wanted to do was get a little deeper into galactic formation. Again, keep in mind we're looking at Hubble's telescopes, and we're listening to Eugenie Scott and people like that, and just hearing about all of these physical structures in the universe and how they relate to galactic evolution. And there was one dynamic that we discovered for galactic creation, for galactic evolution, that was not captured by gravitational collapse. And this is called self-propagating star formation. Stochastic self-propagating star formation. You can look it up. It's called SSPF. Stochastic self-propagating SSPF. And the idea behind this is that the galaxy is filled with dust and gas and all of these things, and certain regions of the galactic nebula become so dense that they begin to collapse and form stars. Okay, but when stars form, they ignite and they heat up the local area, and they push the heat. Creates the solar wind creates pressure surrounding the nebula, and it clears it out, right? And it clears it away. And what that does is it creates more regions of density right around that star. okay, which promotes the development of more stars because you just increase the density because you're pushing on it. Those stars heat up the galaxy around them, and on and on and on, right? And what we were finding was, like, though we could use particle man to kind of sculpt nebulas any which way we wanted to, they didn't evolve because we have no stellar formation in that prototype. If you took our particle man nebula and let it run, it would eventually fizzle out or become a sphere or something, right? Because there was no stellar formation. So we studied this dynamic, and we took the idea of cellular automata in a grid and sort of the idea from Waterboy of a scalar field. And cellular automata are discrete grids, and the simulations like Waterboy are scalar field values. And we said, okay, let's make a different scalar. Instead of water height, all right, we're going to have basically two values: density of material, how much matter there is in a place, and temperature. Okay, and from that we can derive pressure. What's the equation for pressure, temperature, and volume from high school?
PV is nRT.
PV equals nRT, exactly. So each cell in this simulation is running PV equals nRT, right? And each cell says, okay, I've got X number of kilograms of mass. I am at Y number of kelvins of temperature. That creates, V amounts of pressure. I look at my neighbors. My neighbors are at a higher pressure, so they're going to create. So there'll be a flow vector coming into me from that. This neighbor is at a lower pressure, so there'll be a flow vector coming out. On every frame, we calculate all these vectors, and then we transport matter along with its heat from cell to cell, right? So if I'm hotter and at a higher pressure than you, and you're colder and at a lower pressure than I am, then my vector is going to be like, 15 kilograms or whatever is going to move from me to you. My 15 kilograms is going to come into you. It's going to come into you at my temperature, and then we're going to average that out with your temperature. So let's say you have 20 kilograms in your area at 5 Kelvin, and I have 30 kilograms, at 20 Kelvin. Well, I'm probably going to move some fraction of that 25 kilogram difference, let's say 5 kilograms or so, at my temperature and mix it, statistically with yours. And running this simulation creates shapes that look like this. And we got very excited when we saw this because these are exactly the kinds of shapes we saw in Hubble. These are not artistically created. This comes from random noise. I randomly just fill the galaxy with whatever dust I want, and I let the simulation run. And the simulation leads to that. And I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like. So the question we're asking ourselves here is, can we develop a system that will naturalistically give rise to the kinds of structures, again, that we're seeing in Hubble, and fill in the gaps that were left by the Particle Man simulator. I'll move this along to a little more interesting spot because it's runs for a while. Okay, so you can see here that as the gas begins to condense, right, we create these stars. The red stars are red dwarfs. They last for a long, long time. So red dwarfs last for orders and orders of magnitude longer than stars like our sun. And our sun lasts for a couple orders of magnitude longer than large, very, very large stars. So the time scale, is a problem. If I allow a blue giant to last for a second, then a red dwarf is going to last for like a year in our time. So I basically have a system that goes in and culls red dwarfs, because red dwarfs don't add a lot of heat to the system. So I have a certain maximum population of red dwarfs, and I cut them off. And then what you'll start to see in this video is little areas where supernovas are going off. Any star above a certain number of solar masses goes nova when it dies, and those novas heat up the surrounding area a lot faster and more dramatically. So you can see here what we have is a model of galactic evolution, once again, that's meeting our criteria of being something that's gamic and something we can play with, right? You can imagine developing tools that allow us to sculpt this kind of thing into this kind of system. And we got really excited by the development of this prototype because it meant that we were really going to be able to allow people to play with galactic structures that we've been seeing coming in out of the scientific community. And you won't do anything with it. Okay, let me pause here. Well, all right. And just to give you a sense of that, bear with me. Do a quick quick time seems to be going into slow time. Come on, quick time. Don't mess with me. Don't mess with me. Okay. So we'll pause this one. Huh. Mouse. I'm just stuck. That's just depressing. It's almost done. See what happens when it stops. See if it stops by itself. Yeah. Okay. It should stop by itself. All right. Sorry for that. Anyway, so one of the things that we always want to do with these, when we're answering prototypes like this, is what we're looking for is interactivity. You know, the big question we're asking between Water Boy and Gaslight is, can we simulate these things in such a way that there'll be some interesting interactivity with them? And interactive means you go away when I click you. There you go. Okay. So here's an example of Gaslight being a little more interactive. So what you saw there was just evolving on its own. But we also developed these tools that allowed you to just paint with heat across the system, right? And you could like sign your name on the galaxy, right? And stars will form around it. And we can freeze the system at any time because the game is supposed to take place over the course of the lifetime of ordinary creatures. They're living 100 years, maybe 1,000 years or whatever, but they're not living for periods of time that are relevant to the to galactic dynamics. So we had this idea that you would have these tools that you can go in and you'd have this kind of like dynamic finger paint that you could play with and make yourself a galaxy and then freeze it. And play a game in that galaxy. And of course, and once again, because just of the practicalities of game development, this remained an internal thing, an internal artist's expression. We didn't externalize it. But design your own galaxy was definitely something that's on the plate for this product because we found that we wanted people developing the animals and the creature editor and that kind of thing. I'm not showing you a lot of the creature editor because I didn't work on the prototyping for that. But editing your own galaxy was definitely something now we know that we could do. Right? We could give you tools that work like other kinds of editors. Okay, so let me see if we're on here. Okay, so this was a lot of like very abstract kind of like experimenting with different kinds of dynamics and painting tools and like, oh, can we simulate this much gravity, or can you figure out a way that we can play with water? Can you figure out, hey, look at these equations from this star formation. Can we make that actually appear on a screen? And then it came to a certain point where we wanted to start getting into actual game dynamics, right? So okay, now we have to start thinking about games. It's been a couple years now, and it's time for sport to start becoming a game. And so one of the simulators that I developed, as we began thinking about things that you want to play with, we started with SimCity, right? We said, we have in SimCity, we have residential, industrial, and commercial zones. And at this time in SimCity, we began to think that maybe we want agents moving around inside the city to actually be relevant. In previous versions of the SimCity, when you saw traffic and you saw people, they weren't doing anything. They were reflective of an underlying statistical simulator. So you'd see a section of sidewalk, and you'll see people walking on it, and the section right next to it, they're not there. They're like appearing and disappearing. And it's because the sidewalk just has a simulator that says, well, there's lots of traffic in this one little section, not a lot of traffic in these other sections. And then we just had a system that said, well, sprout people where there's more activity and let them die where there's less. But they're not contributing to the simulation. Right? And so we started looking at ways of having SimCity become an emergent system. And emergence is one of the key things that we've been playing with in Maxis for 20 years, is the idea that you develop these relatively simple systems like Biome, where you have a chemical stoichiometric equation that just says this species becomes that species in the presence of that catalyst at this rate, right? And or Conway's life is a perfect example of emergence, where you have these very simple rules. This cell will come to life or death based upon the behavior of these other cells. Okay, but then you get things like gliders and smashers and rollers and forest fires and all of these dynamics that we understand have their own rules, right? It's like you think of a forest fire, right? A forest fire is like a living creature. It's like it's got a life cycle, right? If there's a lot of fuel, up that mountain, you're going to see that a fire is going to roll right up that mountain and burn that fuel, right? And you know that it's also part of a life cycle where forests burn down and they leave seeds and they leave fertile ground that then regrows. And all this is happening because of little dynamics. The forest doesn't say, I'm going to catch on fire and do this thing. What happens is fire knows how to move from tree to tree. So all you have to do is develop the rules for fire moving from tree to tree, and you should see the life cycle of a forest fire come to life if you tune it correctly, right? And that's the idea behind emergence. And emergence is a fundamental idea in science. This is the thing that we kind of came to as we were developing our scientific point of view on these things, our applied science point of view, is that, the opposite of emergence is something called reductionism. It says, well, we're all just electron shells around protons and neutrons, and as long as you understand electron shells and protons and neutrons, you will understand Rembrandt and psychology and sexuality and life and politics and and all that kind of stuff. And as long as you throw in gravity, you'll understand the whole galaxy. And that's not true. Fundamentally, even something as basic as thermodynamics, right? You think of what are some fundamental ideas of thermodynamics? Entropy is always increasing, right? In a closed system, entropy never decreases. Or heat balances out. You take two things at different temperatures and you mix them together and they will settle to one temperature. Those are not fundamental rules of the universe. Those are not basic laws of the universe. Those are emergent. They emerge from the rules of particles colliding with each other. Okay? If you simulate the dynamics of basically the ping pong ball model of a molecule, okay, you will come up with all the laws of thermodynamics. But the thermodynamics is not written into the universe. It emerges from the behavior of basically electrical repulsion. And so we want the same thing to sort of be happening in SimCity. SimCity is not an emergent system. It's a statistical system. We built in these laws of statistics, and there's some emergence around the cellular automata. But SimCity does not arise. The economy of SimCity does not arise from the behavior of agents. It arises as an economic model. And so we developed a version of SimCity, a very brief version of SimCity, where traffic was governed by these, residential, industrial, and commercial people coming out of one type of building and wanting to go to another type of building. Okay, and then we could develop all these traffic flows and things like this. And we were starting here with SimCity because SimCity was one of our successes, and because it captured some of the ideas we wanted to capture in SPORE around the large-scale emergence of civilized behavior out of large numbers of animals working with a very small and very simple set of rules. We all have a fairly simple set of rules that govern our behavior. On a given day, you come to class, you come to colloquium, you listen to a boring guy talk. I go to work, I have my muffin, I do my work, I come home. Most of us don't vary our behavior by a tremendous amount. But the living and breathing quality of a city or a civilization comes out of each of us just doing our 5 or 6 things a day that make sense to us, right? Okay. So I don't really have a demonstration of crowd because it's not all that interesting, really. It's just showing this flow. But this is how we began to start thinking about, okay, we have these ideas, we want to apply it to a game. We have this pre-existing game that's very popular, so there we are. Okay, the next system we developed was, okay, the next thing we said is, okay, we want to make a game that's unique to the research we've been doing. So let's make a prototype that takes some of these ideas and puts them together into something that gives you a goal and an avatar and a challenge and that kind of stuff. Because we hadn't done any of that yet. We hadn't done anything that's going to challenge you to do something. And the first one I did was a system called Tidepool. And here you'll see Tidepool. I have a video of this, and I'll show it off in a second. First of all, it has a Biome forest fire simulator here running in kind of cheap graphics. You can see these brown and green sticks are the young and old trees from the Biome simulator. And these little pops here are the fire from the Biome simulator. And you play this little bird-like creature. And then there's a water boy-style water simulator. And basically what you have to do is dip into the water, pick up water, and spray it over the fire. Okay? But one of the emergent properties of it is the more successful you are, the older the forest is going to get, the more susceptible it is to fire. So there was a natural increase in the challenge. Because the more you succeed, naturally the harder the game gets. Without any skill levels or anything exclusive, I was able to make something that will progressively become more and more difficult as you master it. So here's a little example of it, of Tidepool playing. And so your creature, when he's red, that means you're out of water. and he needs to get some water. And then there's these other little creatures who are these yellow guys who just bop around. Like they're the crowd agents from the crowd demo that I showed you. They just sort of go off on there. They have these little missions. They're not residential, commercial, industrial, but they basically want to just sort of bop around. There's a disease they can get. They can mate and create more of each other. And what you're trying to do is keep the critter count above a certain level. And critters die if they hit fire, right? So this became the first like real-time physical, okay, I got to fly this guy, I got to get some water, I got to fly over the terrain, I got to look out for forest fires, I got to protect my little guys, right? And it gave us our first kind of sense that this is something, that we could put all these pieces together that we've been working on the terrestrial level and make them into a game challenge. And the question behind this prototype was essentially, can I get you to play this and want to take the mouse out of my hand? That's one of the values that we had at Maxis is like, if you show me something and I don't want to grab the mouse and get it out of your hand, then it's not a gameplay prototype. Okay, and this was the first one where people were like, oh yeah, I want to fly the little guy, And I wish I had done a better terrain engine, it would have been even more fun, but there you are. Okay, so now we're moving in Spore, we're moving at this point, after a couple of years, we kind of have bounded our scientific problem, and now we're really narrowing in on what kind of gameplay we want. And we spent some time, I don't have much time left, but basically we spent some time going down a path using an engine that we'd gotten from another team in the company, and trying to kind of cobble some of these things together. And we had a scripting system that really wasn't working for us. And we sort of hit a technological wall. And it was preventing us from prototyping gaming. We were trying to make gameplay happen in this system, and we had lots of other, non-gameplay related reasons. So we came back to these OpenGL simple experiments, and we developed the first sort of prototype that represented gameplay that we thought would actually appear in Spore. Okay, so Tidepool was take everything you've been doing, take all these different simulators, and make me a game out of it. But that wasn't going to be Spore. Spore was not a firefighting, creature rescuing game. Right, we said Spore fundamentally has got to be about animal survival. So we created the first truly Spore prototyping game prototype called SPUG, the Spore Universal Gameplay Prototype. And SPUG is where you're going to first start seeing if you've played Spore, some of the things that you're familiar with emerge. It's a game where you play a creature, you have a nest, and you're living in this environment of trees, and there's other flocks of creatures, and they're moving according to a system called Reynolds flocking by Craig Reynolds. I don't have too much time to go into it, but if you want to look up Craig Reynolds, you'll see lots of. How many people have seen the Voids screensaver? You see these creatures that are just kind of flowing like this or that. That's another emergent system. All that's happening there is you have these agents who have these rules that are based upon attraction. Right, and they just say, well, I'm attracted to my most immediate neighbors, and I want to point toward the leader, and I want to move away from any threats, and everybody just and I want to orient myself so I'm pointing in the same direction as my two or three neighbors, closest neighbors. And if everybody just follows these simple rules, you get things that look like flocks and herds of animals that are very naturalistic. And in SPUG, you had to kind of hide out under the trees, avoid the predators, go after the easy prey, get back to your nest, and try and survive through this sort of day cycle. And this became like the beginnings of what would become the creature game in Spore. And I think that's just about it. Okay. And so from SPUG, we started to we realized the creature game was going to be the intro to the game. We really wanted to nail that, right? That we wanted, we figured for the rest of the game, we would have the success of the previous levels. We would have the values that we kind of got from the previous levels to help guide us to develop the later things. But if we hadn't decided on the micro game yet, it was still something that we were thinking about. But we knew for sure the creature game was basically how you were going to get introduced into how to play this game. So it had to be really nailed. So the final prototype we developed was something called Gonzago. And I named this is, Gonzago was the king in the play in Hamlet, right? And when Hamlet says the play is the thing that will reveal the conscience of the king or whatever, he's referring to the play Gonzago. So when I was saying, hey man, the play is the thing, I called it Gonzago. And Gonzago simulated every level of the game that we ultimately ended up shipping. It had the creature game, it had the tribe game, the civilization game. It didn't have the space game. It had every terrestrial level. We released the version that only shows you the creature game because the other levels were not incredibly well realized. But this became, if you've played Spore, you'll see this is where you first see all of the elements that ultimately came into the creature game. Your creature, a terrain that has varying height, creatures who are flocking, bases, food sources. Okay, and you could even go in. There was even a cheap version of the editor, where you could go in and you didn't get to edit the morphology of your creature, but you got to spend points on different skills, just in a regular points dialog box. Okay, and this was the final prototype that we developed. And with this prototype, we actually were able to spring right into the development of the creature game. The creature game had such a complete design available because of this progress. All right, and we had made all of this progress through over the years. We as you see, we had gone down different lines. We've abandoned some of them. We've reinforced others to get to this point. And the question we were asking ourselves with this is, do we have a game here? This was the big prototype question. Can I develop a game where you're playing an animal, in this terrain, using these dynamics that we've had? So as you can see, the comparison here between Gonzago and the final game of Spore, right, is the topology, the layout, the things that ultimately ended up in the game all came out of the Gonzago prototype. And we spent about a year working on that with a five-person team, while the engine team, the core team was developing a graphic system that could do this. We couldn't have prototyped this in this environment. This environment was too difficult to work with. Going into this, we really needed to know what we were doing, because this was focused on getting us high performance, good quality graphical results. It wasn't very flexible compared to this, right? The prototyping process is what allowed us, once this system was in place, the system we ultimately ended up shipping on, to proceed, with confidence that we were going to get to where we wanted to get, because we had seen examples of many things that we wanted to do, many things that we liked but that didn't fit in, many things that we hated that we figured out we had to do. We had made so many decisions using these prototypes that we were able to whip together very quickly, that we didn't spend a lot of time, frustratingly going down narrow paths here. And that's the key insight to prototyping, whether you're developing game software or any other kind of software, is that very often your production frameworks, your final release frameworks, your highly, your high performance frameworks are not going to be very flexible. They're not going to make it easy for you to change your mind, do something different, try something new, without disrupting a lot of people and without messing up a lot of things. And so the prototyping environment is where you can do that, right? And the more time you spend in prototyping, the better, ultimately, because you'll have more confidence, when you're basically playing without a net. And so that's it, and that's me. And I thank you very much for your time and attention.
Are you going to?
Yeah, I'll be at the pizza.
So we have pizza in 28, Darwin 28. Please come there, and Jason is going to be there, so you can ask your questions there. Thank you so much, Jason. Yes, I. Thank you. Excellent talk.
Thank you.
Truly was excellent.
You're a chef? I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him. I thought the same thing.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. This is my friend Jolie.
Yes. We're still
Yes, I know.
don't quite know when it is.
No, I don't.
We have it from
Michael, are you going to get pizza with us?
No, I have a glass of wine.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Do you want me to bring
Even
you a
though
slice of
even though
pizza?
he complains that we don't have pizza at events.
I didn't complain. That's the question.
Dr. Kushesh, are you going to pizza?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. Well, I'll be sure over there. I want to talk to you real quick.
Sure.
instinct that it's more gradual increase in IS curve.
You can never just have a jump in Y. Like that's the biggest thing, because like it makes sense once you get here. Like interest rates go up, so your investment starts going down, so that decrease your Y and slowly go down. But I just don't see the initial jump. That's where I was getting confused.
It's right here, like expenditures go up, causing increased money in here, and so price of oil goes up.
Yeah.
And then resulting in, so then it becomes the cost of
Yeah.
It's gradual versus an instantaneous.
Yeah, because it doesn't happen all at once.
Huh? Oh, no worries. I like your shirt.
Oh, thanks.
Still waiting on my freaking photographs.
Sort of is.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, no, you didn't remember. He was getting the sweat vest. So you can make it now.
All right.
Yeah. They're all kinds of looking, man. Still haven't got. So, anyway. Because remember, how how we always wear those 10 months sweaters.
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't wear it anymore.
Not so much. A little bit. Yeah, you still see him now. Okay? He's kind of. He's still pulling like a dude. You're about 24 hours. He kind of got it together.
He's pretty much, like, where is he from? Is he
I think he's big family. Daughter with special needs.
Is it in the SBE office?
Yeah.
Okay.
from it's going to the
Like by Terry's office?
yes.
Okay. Thanks. I have to meet with him at 3:30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Send one of my t-shirts.
Standing in solidarity. Dr. West? So the review stuff it's kind of like, okay, we'll know everything, pretty much. Like there's no,
Wasn't anything left out?
Not really, no. So, if we're gonna hone, I was just wondering. I know you can't tell us exactly, but could you
I'll do my best.
hone it in a little bit more as to what we should focus on?
I'll do my best. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Tuesday is the exam, right? Or did somebody come prepared for today? If you did, you're ahead of the game. Okay. This is a lot of material. I've talked to a couple of folks about this. I took Professor Eiler's lead on sort of how many exams to do, but probably needs one more.
I think it would almost be better if they were spread out a little more.
Yeah. I think he thinks of it as it's all related, so he doesn't want to interrupt it. Okay, we'll do a little review today. Everybody find the practice exams on Moodle? Right. Well, if you didn't, there are three different documents, I think, that relate to preparation for the exam. Where I'll start today is where we left, which is some of the questions around sort of our modeling of IS and LM. I did get a chance to talk to Professor Eiler, and with a little clarification, he sticks by his text, and we will talk about that as soon as I get to the right spot here. Well, I got your notes, and
Okay.
And as I said, I think that as I understood them, I think they're in